Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I am Allison of the Collaboratory Career Hub, and I am here with Jen, our head of DEI programming. Today, we are here to talk to you about intersectional feminism. Jen's going to walk us through the concept, the history, and leave us with some resources for anyone who wants to learn more. So let's kick it off. Can we start with a basic overview of what intersectional feminism is and how the concept came to be?
Sure. We talked about this a little bit in our previous video. If you haven't checked it out, please do. Intersectionality was a term coined by civil rights leader and legal mind, Kimberly Crenshaw. It is a means to explain the differences in forms of discrimination, such as sexism, racism, that can overlap and compound on one another. It was actually a theory that came about after analyzing a legal case that involved Black women and how those intersecting identities impacted their experience. So that's what intersectionality is. Feminism, of course, is the idea that gender identity and gender equality should be present in both systems and in interpersonal connection. Feminism supposes the idea that women are oppressed and that society needs to take steps to remedy that. Feminism as a whole, as a theory, is great, but feminism certainly leaves out some pieces of centering other people's perspectives. For example, the women's suffrage movement was for white women. A lot of our movements in the country have been around whiteness. And so intersectional femininity is broadening the lens and saying we have to look at the experience of all those people who identify as women in order to be truly intersectional and truly equitable. So, that idea of intersectional feminism is looking at how to remedy these societal pressures and inequities by looking at all people that are represented in the group.
Are you able to give us some examples of intersecting identities within intersectional feminism?
Sure. Intersectionality is understanding the experience of people that have intersecting identities. So, an example would be people of various genders experiencing racism differently, or people of different races experiencing classism differently, or people of different races experiencing sexism differently. We touched on that with intersectional feminism. So, it's having two identities that are marginalized and how those impact your life and how they show up in different scenarios.
Seems like an area where there could be a lot of misconceptions and a lot of confusion. Are you able to touch on some of the broad based things you hear a lot that are misconceptions that maybe we can clear up as we're working through this?
Sure. One of the biggest misconceptions about intersectional feminism is that these identities need to compete with each other, that there needs to be some kind of oppression Olympics where it's my identity as a woman is not as hard as my identity as a Black person. So that really is not the best use of our time. It definitely distracts from the main cause, which is we are supposed to be working on evening the playing field and giving equity to all groups of people. I think that when we get into the conversation about which one is worse or which one experienced what or for how long, it's really a distraction. And I think another one is definitely feeling the need to separate these experiences. Say, for example, you encounter a moment of discrimination with a person and trying to separate your identities out to say, oh, that was because I'm a woman, not because I'm Black. These are things that I think they just serve to distract us from the main purpose, which is intersectional feminism and intersectionality as a whole is looking at the lens for everything and not just one thing or another. Trying to weigh them or trying to separate them is really a distraction. So those are some misconceptions about that.
Okay, great. Thanks. We asked the audience for some questions that they may have, and we're doing a rather quick webinar today. This is a quick touch base. So if you have more questions, definitely send us an email or drop us a note in one of the collaboratory chat rooms. The question that came in was about individuals and co conspirators. How can people be allies? How can people be co conspirators when it comes to intersectional feminism?
So that's a big question. And I think the biggest thing to be able to do when doing intersectional feminism properly is to make sure that your lens and your perspective is as broad as possible. There's another topic we can unpack for hours, but it's around decentering whiteness. So, whiteness is not white people, it's whiteness as a lens, as a perspective, as the dominating force about what is true, what is proper, what is acceptable. And so that's been the story of our society, right? Our history has been told from a white lens. Our experiences are told from a white, and feminism is told from a white lens. So a person that is a co-conspirator would recognize that. Another thing to note when we talk about decentering whiteness, it's not just the work for white people to do, that's for everyone to do. Everyone has been conditioned that this is the perspective that matters. We all have to do that work to train our minds to think broadly, to think about how is the most marginalized person in this group going to be impacted by what I say or what I do. A co-conspirator would recognize that need to have a broad lens and would come to the experience looking to listen, looking to see how they can impact, and not needing to lead or not needing to control the flow of the information. So a co-conspirator is going to have a very broad view and be open to decentering what they've learned.
The other question that we got, and I think this is a really interesting one, is about how successful organizations think about intersectional feminism. How do they make sure their organizations are inclusive and factoring in intersectional feminism when they're designing policies and thinking about, protecting their employees?
Sure. I think it's pretty similar to being a co conspirator, which is making sure your lens is as broad as possible. The best way for companies to achieve equity is to make sure that their policies are in action. If your policies contain input from people from all kinds of identities, if you've done your research, if you've been listening, you will be able to really build an environment where everyone's intersecting identities are heard, are seen, are celebrated. And it won't be hard to form policies once you form the foundation. I would say my best advice for companies looking to address intersectional feminism is to make sure that your view is broad and to make sure that you're considering all the identities that are represented in the group.
I had another question for you. What really got you and I speaking about intersectional feminism was the use of the term glass ceiling. For educating me that that's a really problematic term that I should eliminate from my vocabulary. And I had never heard that before. And I was so interested in the background and the education around that. Would you be open to talking about that and how that encompasses this intersectional feminism?
To be fair, the glass ceiling is a term that we've all used. It's not something that you were the first person to ever say. And obviously, the intention is not to be obtuse or anything like that. The glass ceiling really embodies white feminism. What that means is the glass ceiling supposes that women are all on equal footing and are able to look up and see this glass ceiling and see this level that they cannot meet. It doesn't account for all the experiences of women who are in front of a concrete wall or a brick wall, or the women who couldn't make it in the room, or the women who were locked up somewhere. It doesn't encompass all the views. It supposes the idea that women are a monolith and we're not, that we all have the same experience, that we all have the same background, and that all we need to do is break this glass ceiling and we'll be on equal footing with men. That's just not an inclusive view. We have to really consider, what did it take for these women to even get in the room to see the glass ceiling? And how can we make sure that we're all at least to that point so we can all break it together? That's why the glass ceiling really reflects a purview of white feminism that doesn't encompass everybody's experience.
As always, I am so grateful that you are willing and able to educate me and help me learn things every day. Thank you for that.
We're learning together, though. I have been doing this a while and I have certain things that I've learned and I keep learning along the way. We're learning together and I'm happy that we're able to do that.
For anyone who wants to dive deeper into intersectional feminism, where would you suggest they start looking? Do you know of any resources that people who want to dive into this topic could start looking into? Maybe we can link them below.
Sure. For starters, as a base, I always tell people if you're looking to start this journey, start reading things from people who do not represent the groups that you're from. So, for folks that are looking to understand intersectional feminism, definitely look to some Black female writers, some trans writers, some folks that have been encountering different things that you haven't experienced and start to widen your view. Also, any of the work by Kimberly Crenshaw is great. She has a book called Intersectionality that is awesome. There are also several TED Talks on intersectionality. And I would say just start by reading and listening and making sure that you're occupying your space with perspectives from different kinds of people. That's a great place to start because this is a marathon, right? This is going to be a lot of things to learn, but starting with just listening is always the best place to start.
Awesome. Jen, thank you as always. Thank you everyone for tuning in and for joining us. We'll be back next time with more awesome insight from Jen, and we're looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.